Hello, everyone. My name is Sheila Zaga, and my material culture object were the Chinese Tang tomb figures. I just want to go over a little bit of the objectives of what I want you guys to learn today. Identify what burial figures are and their symbolism to the Chinese. Understand the artistic and cultural expansion of the Tang dynasty. Explain when and where the object was made, what it was used and created for, and who used and created it, and why. And lastly, demonstrate understanding by explaining what these figures tell us about the Tang dynasty and Silk Roads during this time. My table of contents, so you know what you're getting yourself into. Slides 4 and 5 is an overview of my object. 6 and 7, relation to ideas, themes, and places from course lectures. And slide 8, relation to the Lu book. And 9 and 10, why does it matter? So let's get started. Who, what, when, where, and so these figures date back to 728 AD during the Tang dynasty, which according to our lecture notes would be 7th century during the golden age of the Silk Roads. These were made for Lu Tingjun, who was a rich general of the Zhongwu army. He was lieutenant of the Henan and Hunan district and imperial privy councillor. They were found by George Euphimopios, terrible pronunciation, in 1936 in Luoyang, China. They were uniquely crafted from earthenware sculpture with a painted Sankai design of 3 colored glazed figurines. And according to an article from Berticana on East Asian and Southeast Asian pottery, the Tang dynasty reached an important stage in its development of arts and pottery specifically. And perhaps the most important single development was the use of colored glazes as monochromes or splashed and dappled. The Tang wares that are most common in our Western collections are those with either the monochrome or dappled glazes, covering a highly absorbent buff earthenware body, which is what we can see found in Tingjun's tomb. So, why? How are they used? And why were the questions that bring us back to the traditional life in China and their burial customs. So, according to the Victoria and Albert Museum, the world's leading museum of art and design, the proper conduct of burial ceremony has always been a matter of great importance to the Chinese. The soul of a person was believed to always been a matter of great importance to the Chinese. The soul of a person was believed to leave the body at death in order to take its place in the spirit world. An elaborate funeral gave the spirits in the next world, as well as the mourners left behind, a clear idea of the rank of the dead person, and the separation of body and soul was felt to cause some fear and confusion to the new spirit, so the surviving members of the family tried to provide it with all the support it needed. So it's logical to say that these figures were made for high-status tombs because they were expensive to make, and they were also made for protection of the person's soul in the afterlife. And the Chinese believed that you needed to have all of your essentials in life with you in the grave. And so another interesting fact that I found out was that paper money used to be buried with the dead along with other goods that was made out of paper, and they were sent to the afterlife by burning. And I found this fact mentioned in China's Cosmopolitan Empire, the Tang Dynasty, by Mark Edward Lewis. And so these figures shown were only a few of his belongings, and they come in 6 pairs, and they include 2 earth spirits, 2 Lokapalas, which is Buddhist guardian figures, 2 civil servants, 2 horses, 2 camels, and 3 grooms. All these figures would have been placed at the entrance to the main burial chamber, according to the British Museum. So now that we know what these Tang big burial figures are, when and where they're made, who they were made for, how they were used, and why, I wanted to connect us back to what we already know about the Tang dynasty. So it begins with this figure here. Lai Yuan, or more popularly known by his temple name of Gaozu, this man rose from the crumbles of the previous Sui dynasty as a military official, and he overcame various rivals and rebels. And by 621, he controlled China's eastern plain. And in 624, he added most of the rest of North and South China. He directed many complex military operations in his tenure and established the basic institutions of the Tang state. And Professor Hockley mentions this in the Korean roof tile lecture, that the Tang dynasty is what unified all of China, and it kind of created a stable foundation on which trade and wealth could really flourish. Here, just some more background. So, the unified Tang dynasty can explain why it is regularly cited as the greatest imperial dynasty in ancient Chinese history. It was the golden age of cultural and artistic advancement. And we were introduced to the Tang dynasty in lecture 2 when Professor Hockley mentioned that this was the era of like a boom in international trade. It was the golden age, and these people were very powerful and wealthy. And then we learned more about the Tang dynasty in lecture 6. And so before the Tang consolidated China back together, they wanted all the different provinces in China to be subservient to the Tang family. And so to do that, they did 2 things. First, they created an examination system based on Confucianism that made ranking officers' qualifications solely based on merit. And this stabilized China's government. And as we learned in the lecture, it kind of prevented rebellions by placing certain generals in certain areas. And I think that is super interesting because it can give us a little insight into Li Chingzun and his ranking nobility as an elite. And although it's stated in the source given to us by the History of the World from BBC, Oliver Moore explained further. Administration was a bureaucratic operation, and that there was a very small group whose significance grew throughout the dynasty, who took examinations and competed for state degrees. And later on, this system becomes magnified. You have something like 15,000 men coming to the capital to take exams, of whom only around 1,500 would get a degree. So this is a system in which the largest number, well over 90%, will fail repeatedly for the whole of their lives. At the same time, this system fosters loyalty to the dynasty, which is quite remarkable, really. So the first thing that the Tang did that really stabilized their culture and their government was the examination system. And second, they created these sumptuary laws that permitted only elite wearing purple. And so what is super interesting here and can tell us something about the Silk Roads is, as we learned in lecture also, that Confucianism did not place any special importance on purple, and we can see that it came from the royal color of purple in the Byzantine Empire and how it spread into the East as a transcultural exchange. This lecture also briefly touches on Chinese pottery, and specifically we're shown a picture, I don't know if you guys remember, of a vivid, colorful horse which represented Silk Road goods. And Professor Hockley also touched on the popularity of Tang porcelain. So this lecture, in lecture 6, showed us a lot of influences from the Silk Road and how they influenced politics in Tang China. And it also recounts the Battle of Tallahassee River and how it shows us the Abbasid Empire is expanding east and the Tang Empire is expanding west. And so we can remember the Battle of Tallahassee River is the conflict when they meet in the middle. So there's And all of this also relates to our readings as well, which is super cool. In the Lu book of chapter 6, we encounter Wang Chang, and his title in the book in chapter 6 is Who Died for Purple? Who Died for a Purple Robe? And so that shows us how valuable purple was in the Tang Dynasty, that it was such a societal good because it showed status, and it was so important to these people that Wang Chang literally died for it. We also see the extraordinary wealth of the Tang from the story in chapter 4 of our new book, Life Along the Silk Roads by Susan Whitfield, The Princess Tale of Tahi. So this whole chapter recounts her journey to her new arranged marriage, and it describes the grandeur and glorious wedding, but it especially focuses on her dress. Being an imperial princess, she was the emperor's sister. And around the time of 821 to 843, we witnessed that great wealth that poured out of China in this time. And so both of these stories we find in both of our books give us intimate insight into the lives of the people who were directly affected by the Tang's great wealth. And thus it allows us to infer some things about our general, Lu Tingjun, who was buried with our burial figures. And so now that I've given you a recap of what we've learned and witnessed in lectures and readings, I can now explain the significance. So, although these figures might not seem like a luxurious object along the Silk Road, they very clearly state the high status and importance of the person that they were made for. This is really, really important. These objects also tell us a close relation of the military and civil administration in Tang China, that military leaders were also highly involved in civil administration and vice versa. These figures are also lively reminders of the great cultural and artistic heights of the Tang Dynasty, and how the production of these figurines and pottery and porcelain were confident projections both at home in China during these burial rituals and abroad in trade in the Silk Road. So, and then from day one, we have discussed the importance and influence of horses along the Silk Road in ancient Asia in the early trading between the zone and the steppe, their value in military and power structures. So it's very interesting that the horse is also a figure, a part of Lu Tingjun's burial. It's very symbolic to him as a military leader and as a rich and important person as well. And I think BBC did a great job of summarizing the assemblage of these objects and their importance and symbolic significance to the Tang. It basically called the horses the Bentleys and the Porsches, and the camels, they were heavy good vehicles. And how, here it says at the very end, I'll read it to you. It says, the whole assemblage of Lu Tingjun's tomb, figures and animals, and obituary text speak of China's steady westward expansion under the Tang, the wealth that came to it from its domination of the trade routes, and the social and intellectual sophistication of its governing elite. So that is all I have for you guys. I hope you walk away with more knowledge about the Tang Dynasty and about just how little objects can tell us a lot about a culture. It can tell us a lot about the economy of that culture, the trade of that culture, their rituals, practices, and beliefs, what they value, and also about their class system. So I hope you guys have a wonderful week and that you learned a lot. Thank you so very much.